Hi, everyone. Just double check that you can see my my slides.
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, awesome. Pleasure to meet you all. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my PhD studies. And first of all, I'll start off with how I actually got into what I do. If I can change my slide. Yeah. Okay, so when I went to university, I started off very much living my scientific life in the lab. I love mixing up different things together, doing experiments, very much the typical lab scientist. I was a biochemist. But along the way, I picked up scuba diving as a hobby. And I just got enthralled with the ocean, especially with large animals that live there. I loved it so much that I wanted other people to experience it as well. So I became a scuba dive instructor, teaching other people how to dive. The more time I spent in the ocean, the more I started getting quite interested in the different marine animals that live there, but also getting a little bit concerned with some of the things that I saw happening. Things like marine pollution, for example. So that's when I decided to enroll in postgraduate studies at Murdoch University and also join up with the conservationists at Marine Megafauna Foundation. So here's me, but it's not just me on the team. There's quite a lot of us, and we all worked very, very hard. We're all spaced around the world, and actually it's very rare that we see each other. Maybe once a year or once every 2 years we get together and see each other in person. But we all support each other, you know, through the internet community and do conservation science together. And what is it that really brings us together? Well, it's our love for large animals, or marine large animals, marine megafauna. So we're particularly interested in the largest ray of the ocean. That's the manta ray, also here behind me on my little poster, and also the largest shark, but also the largest fish, the whale shark. So you might notice that these two animals are also on Marine Megafauna's logo, along with the sea turtle, because these are the species that we mostly focus on. Okay, so manta rays and whale sharks have a couple of things in common. But interestingly, they are, well, besides for being elasmobranchs, which is a type of fish that has a cartilage and a skeleton, they are also filter feeders, which means that they are filtering water or sieving the water in order to get their food and meet their energy demands. So literally sieving for a living. Oh. So this is what they're going after. Small animals called zooplankton that float around with the currents. But being one of the biggest fish in the sea and having to eat some of the smallest animals in the sea, you imagine that you have to eat quite a lot to meet your large energy demand. So manta rays are ingesting about 90 cubic meters of water per hour, and whale sharks are whopping 300 cubic meters of water per hour. And if that's difficult for you to comprehend, here is a cubic meter, also known as a ton of water. So multiply that in your head 90 times for the mantas or 300 times for the whale sharks. And remember, that's per hour. Okay, so mantas have some interesting feeding behavior. We often see them feeding very near the surface, where they are just basically skimming just underneath. They've got their mouths wide open. They've got these fins called the cephalic fins, which help them funnel water in. They can also bottom feed and get down really close down to the sediment, and then just kind of scoop their fins either inward or slightly out so they can eat up any plankton that has sunk down. And sometimes they do basically a somersault called a barrel roll, where they feed on the same patch of plankton over and over again. So they do this when the plankton is quite patchy, and instead of basically swimming forward and backward, they'll somersault over the same area. So see, these are some of the feeding behaviors that we observe. Whale sharks are pretty good at filter feeding as well. They do basically ram feeding, where they just swim into the water and gulping along as they go. And they've got a pretty big mouth as well. So you don't want to get in front by an accident. All right, so let's look at the distribution of these animals. Where are the manta rays and also the whale sharks? Well, And generally, they are found in similar parts of the world. They love the equatorial, warmer tropical waters. But in some parts of the world where ocean currents bring warmer waters up north or south, like for example, the coast of South Africa, or up as far north as Japan, and even some parts of the Atlantic, we can actually see both manta rays and whale sharks. Okay, so that's about the megafauna. So what about the microplastics? Well, you guys all know what plastic is. It's a pliable material made from hydrocarbons, and microplastic just refers to a size class of plastic. So scientifically, when we talk about microplastics, we're talking about plastic that's between 1 micron, very small, can't see it with our naked eye, to about 5 millimeters in size, which is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these bits here on my ruler. So most of these microplastics here are between 1 and 2 millimeters that you see. So there's other size classes of plastic as well, nanoplastic, which is really small, and then mesoplastic and macroplastics, which are the larger bits of plastic that you can more easily see with your naked eye. So for my studies, I'm basically focusing on this size range, the micro to mesoplastic. Okay, so what happens to plastic when it's exposed to the environment? It does degrade with the radiation from the sun. So UV radiation breaks it down, makes it brittle, and breaks it down into little pieces, along with other environmental conditions. For example, when it's in the ocean, it gets carried away by waves, and as it breaks into the shore, it starts to become into smaller and smaller pieces. So this is problematic because when it's small, it's more easily ingestible by marine life. And it's not just the problem of ingesting something that's not digestible. The problem also comes that a lot of plastics have a number of toxins that are added to them during the manufacturing process, but are also really good at absorbing or attaching other toxic substances known as persistent organic pollutants, which are found in the marine environment. So basically, these little pieces of plastic act like little toxic pills, which when ingested by marine life, go up into the food web and food chain, transfer up the food chain, and potentially even end up on our own dinner plates. Okay, so that's the not so great news. Sorry. Got and that is that we have an estimated 5 trillion pieces of plastic that are floating around in our ocean currently. And it's not uniform. It's spread around in different places. So we have these 5 oceanic gyres, which basically are large rotating currents. One is in the North Atlantic, and there's one in the South Atlantic, in the Indian Ocean, in the North Pacific, and also in the South Pacific. And these large rotating currents basically concentrate the large and small floating debris. So this is where we see our biggest concentration of plastic and also microplastics. So on my little map here, the darker the color, the red, the more plastic is estimated to be floating around in these areas. Okay, so here what I've outlined is the Coral Triangle region. So this is where I'm currently located here in Indonesia. And this place is really special. It is what's called the Coral Triangle. It's composed of Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and East Timor. So basically 6 countries, but it houses over 600 species of corals, or 76% of the world's coral types, and over 2,000 species of reef fish, or about just over a third of the world's species of reef fish can be found here. And it does support the lives, the jobs, and the ability to make an income for over 120 million people. So it's important to take that into consideration. This is an important environment, not only for nature, for marine life, but also for a number of people. So this is a reason why we need to keep this environment as healthy as possible. But unfortunately, some estimates put that plastic by weight is going to be outnumbering fish in just a little bit over 30 years from now. So this is a reason why I got really interested in studying marine plastic and trying to figure out solutions on how to prevent this from happening in the next 30 years. So we already know that plastic impacts marine life. Over 90% of seabirds, unfortunately, have ingested plastic, and between 18 to 30% of commercial fish stocks in Europe are known to ingest plastic as well. All species of marine turtles have been documented to ingest plastic, and more concerningly, the smallest animals in the sea, the zooplankton, the very thing that manta rays and whale sharks are feeding on, is also capable of ingesting the smallest pieces of microplastic. And in some parts of the world, for example, in the North Pacific gyre, plastic actually outnumbers plankton 6 to 1. So there's 6 times more plastic than plankton. So these are some figures to, you know, make a Halloween story out of. So going back to the plastic pollution hotspots, I just wanted to show you where the habitat range for the whale shark is overlapping with those hotspots. So those lines are showing you whale sharks. And then the next one, oh, sorry. The next one is the manta rays. So again, this coral triangle region stands out as a place where not only is it a habitat for manta rays and whale sharks, but it's also an area that's got quite a bit of microplastic pollution. So another reason that we wanted to look into look into plastic pollution and how it might impact some of these largest animals, the manta rays and the whale sharks, is because these animals unfortunately are threatened with extinction. They're facing a number of threats worldwide. Their populations are declining. So any additional threats needs to be quickly assessed and looked into. The good news is there are a number of protection treaties which are aimed to help curb these population declines, but they need all the help that they can get from scientists and from the public alike. So the very first thing I did when I started my PhD almost over 4 years ago is I started to go to locations where we knew manta rays and whale sharks were feeding and having a snorkel to look in the water and see what I can find there. So here's a video of me looking at one of these locations. This is in Manta Bay in Nusa Penida, which is just next door to where I'm currently located. And you can see there's quite a bit of debris in the water, some natural, some plastic. And I'm gonna dunk my head under water now and see what's going on there. Water's nice and blue and clear and it's quite warm, but there is some plastic floating underneath as well. And here's those manta rays feeding quite close to where the plastic is, feeding amongst that. And remember, this is just the stuff. Oh, there's a plastic straw. That's just the plastic that you can see with the naked eye. These are the scuba divers. They're here to see the manta rays. And here's the mantas going about their day and feeding along around the same area where the plastic is congregating. Is also where the zooplankton is brought in, because the plastic and the zooplankton come in on the very same currents. All right, so I thought, okay, this is a pretty good place to do my research. And then a friend of mine shared this photo with me. This is a particularly bad day in the very same location. Okay, so this wasn't the only location that we chose. So that's location B in Nusa Penida, just south of Bali. That's pretty much where I currently am at the moment. We also wanted to look at some whale shark feeding grounds. So this is in Java, just east of where I am. And also west of where I am in A, and then east to where I am, another manta ray feeding location in the Komodo National Park. So those are my 3 study locations. And basically what we did is we sampled the water with this plankton net in a quantitative fashion, meaning that we're able to calculate the volume of water that enters in. We also swam with a smaller net a bit closer to the animals. We didn't want to bring our big boat and disturb them. While we were on the boat, we also took visual counts of the plastic. So we had 2 volunteers on either side of the boat, basically counting all the plastic that they saw within 5 meters apart from the boat on either side. And then we get back to the lab with some help from my volunteers. We counted, categorized, measured all the pieces of plastic that we found in those samples. So this is just a little screenshot down my microscope tube just to see what I'm finding. And this is a little example of what the water surface sometimes look like, similar to that video. And we also looked at some differences between the rainy season and the dry season. So we don't have winter and we don't have summer here. It's always pretty warm, but we have about 6 months of the year where we get a lot of rain. And then we have another 6 months of the year where we haven't had rain at all. So I wanted to compare to see if there's any difference between those two times. Here's another little video of me doing my favorite part of my job, and that's swimming with the mantis, of course, and stealing their food. Well, just a little bit. This video is actually in Komodo, and that's me swimming past with the little net, stealing some of their food so I can look at it and see if there's any plastic in there. Okay, so I had a lot of help from students from the university in Bali called Udayana University, and they came out with me every year and rain or shine, helped me collect samples and do the laboratory work. So this is a typical wet season day, and this is a pretty typical dry season day, so a little bit different. And we actually found quite a bit of difference in the amount of visual plastic that we found floating on the surface. So in the rainy season, we had a lot more plastic, 29,000 pieces of plastic per kilometer squared. Whereas in the dry season, well, not only, but 600 pieces of plastic per kilometer squared. So quite a significant difference between the plastic. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this video. This is a video my friend took a couple years back and went kind of viral across the world as diver with plastic, rubbish diver. But anyways, this video was taken during that rainy season. During the dry season, we don't see things like that. Okay, so looking at the type of plastic that we saw floating around, the most common, there's different types. We saw soft, meaning like plastic bags and wrappers, hard, like little pieces of bottle caps or plastic forks or spoons or things like that. Foam, like styrofoam, plastic bottles, drinking bottles, and just other miscellaneous items. And what we found was that plastic bags and wrappers, soft films, basically, were the most common type of plastic that we found in all of our locations, regardless of wet or dry season. This is the manta locations and the whale shark locations. So this is definitely a place where we can start trying to cut down the amount of plastic that enters in the ocean by stopping to use plastic bags and cutting down on the wrappers and things that we introduce into our lives. Okay, so a little bit more detail now, looking at the small pieces of plastic. These are the plastic that we sampled with our net. So we found again that films, those soft plastics, were most common kind in pretty much all of our locations, but in some locations fragments, so the harder bits were actually more common. All right, and then we basically took the number of pieces of plastic that we found from our trawls, from our net tows, and we calculated how many pieces of plastic we get per cubic meter. And then knowing how many cubic meters of water mantas ingest per hour, we can calculate that manta rays in some of our locations, for example, the Nusa Penida, where I have showed you the videos, can ingest up to 63 pieces of plastic per hour. Whereas whale sharks in the Java location are potentially ingesting about 137 pieces of plastic per hour. So this is another little shot down my microscope tube. You can see these are the little pieces of plastic, and next to them is the tiny little plankton that the animals are actually going for. Oh, that went a bit fast, sorry. It's kind of spoiled the ending there. But yeah, so not just theoretical, but we wanted to have a look at, well, are they really ingesting the plastic? And one way we can do that is, okay, this is a bit gross, but if we're very lucky, we can actually collect their poop. Yeah, so that's part of my job. I collect manta poop, and it's quite rare actually to get manta poop. So I've asked the community of divers around me if they wouldn't mind carrying a little tube with them in the pocket of their diving jackets, and if they happen to see a manta poop, if they wouldn't mind just picking it up. So that's what they did. And this is a photo of a sample of plastic that I did find in a manta poop. So indeed, mantas are ingesting plastic and actually able to expel it and pass it. And this photograph here is actually of some manta vomit. So this manta had ingested a bunch of plastic with a bunch of zooplankton and decided, I don't like it, and just expelled it out through its mouth. One of my colleagues was there and picked it all up and brought it back to the lab. And as you can see, there's even some candy wrappers in there. So even the bigger stuff made it into the mouth. But good job, Manta, you spit it out. For whale sharks, we didn't have the opportunity to do any of those sample collection, but we know from other studies in Brazil, for example, and in the Philippines that pieces of plastic have been found inside the stomach of whale sharks. So that pretty much confirms that whale sharks are also ingesting plastic. So it kind of sounds pretty grim note to end on, but remember guys, these are some of the largest animals in the sea. They're quite special. Quite a lot of people come from all over the world just to swim and see these animals. A lot of people in this part of the world are very proud that they have these animals here. So they are considered iconic species, flagship species if you have it. Basically, they can be a symbol to lead a change or a campaign for improvement in environmental conditions. So if enough people care about this animal, they're going to care about where it lives, they're going to care about the lifestyle that it has. And obviously, if there's a lot of plastic in the water, they're going to want to change that and help protect that animal. So this is basically what we're doing, is we're raising the alarm about the environmental conditions in some of these marine protected areas and national parks by showcasing how these animals are being impacted by the plastic there. Another cool thing about these large animals is that they have very large habitat ranges. They need to have a big roaming range in order to be able to get enough energy to maintain their large size. They swim from one place to another. I mean, mantas can swim for over 600 kilometers. We know a few mantas swimming in 450 kilometers in less than a month. So that makes them ideal species, because by protecting their entire habitats, they're also going to protect all the other species that are sharing their home with them. So this is kind of where we are at the moment. The next step is to figure out, well, what does it mean if they're ingesting the plastic, and is it okay if they pass it? Well, remember, the plastic also has those toxic substances. So what we're actually really worried about is that they might be ingesting those toxic substances that are getting inside their bodies and causing some problems. So that's kind of the next step of the research, is to figure out what are those biochemical problems that might be occurring to these animals. Sorry, a lot of jumping around. Oh, they don't want me to show this slide. Why? Oh, no.
You can tell us about it if it won't stay. There you go. It's stuck.
Rivers. Yeah. So what this is a map of the rivers, and where, and the bigger the blue dot, this is from another study, the bigger the blue dot, the larger the amount of plastic waste that enters the water. So in the top left corner is the entire world, and then I've selected out our region. As you can see, a lot of the big blue dots are in our region. So basically what this helps us figure out is how to stop the plastic from getting into the ocean is go to the rivers and try to prevent illegal dumping, clean up the rivers that are the plastic and the other trash that's already there, and stem basically the debris before it even gets into the ocean. So that's kind of a good place to start. And you can help too. You can help at home by quitting some single-use plastics, shopping bags, plastic water bottles, drinking straws, and takeaway containers. So those are your big 4 that you can cut out straight away. And you can also help out. You can go and clean a beach or a riverbed and get that plastic out of the ocean. You can become a citizen scientist. So you can track the amount of debris that you're collecting, but there's so many other citizen science projects. Maybe manta rays and whale sharks might not be a thing. Maybe you're into sea turtles or something else. There's so many projects you can get involved in and become part of the army of scientists. It's really cool. That's how I got started, to be fair. Make sure you get out and enjoy nature, because you need to love something in order to want to protect it, right? And of course, stay in touch with us, the Marine Megafauna Foundation, for all the other stuff that we might be up to. So in Indonesia, we say terima kasih. That means thank you. And that's thanks to all the volunteers, students, supporters that have come along out in the field and helped me out. This is just a few of their happy faces. And of course, all the other supporters that make the research possible. So yeah, thanks guys.